Good morning, distinguished delegates, friends, colleagues. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today to the launch of the second edition of the Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report. La traduction est disponible en anglais et français. Veuillez sélectionner votre langue préférée en utilisant le bouton Interprétation sur Zoom. Je m'appelle Arafat Jamal et je suis coordinateur pour ce deuxième Forum mondial sur les réfugiés. I will now briefly introduce the program to you. Before we get started, please note that this session is being live streamed. It is also being recorded and will be made available online afterwards. And the summary and presentation from this session will be available on UNHCR's website. First, we are going to hear some opening remarks from our Assistant High Commissioner, Madame Gillian Triggs. We will then view a short video on the report, after which I will hand over to Tarek Abou-Shabakeh, Chief Statistician with UNHCR, who is going to deliver an overview of the key findings and recommendations from the report. Working with the data community to track the implementation of the GCR, there is much more internationally comparable data now available for the 16 GCR indicators in the 2 years since the last report. While every effort is made to ensure that the most rigorous available data and statistics are used in this report, limitations remain for some indicators related to timeliness, comparability, representativeness, and disaggregation of available data. So to launch the report, following the presentation of the findings, we will have a panel discussion on advancing the inclusion of forcibly displaced populations in data systems and improving data availability, quality, and capacity relevant to the indicator report. The panel will also reflect on the key findings and recommendations of the report to inform the development of pledges and discussions during the GRF in December. At the end of the discussion, questions may be posed to the panelists through the pigeonhole. After this, we will ask Assistant High Commissioner Gillian Triggs to give us some of her closing reflections. And at the end of the launch report of this launch event, the report will go live on UNHCR's website at noon Geneva time. And I do encourage all of you to take a look at it. And I would also like to note that for those who will be attending today's informal GRF preparatory session, there will also be an opportunity to make comments from the floor. I would now like to invite Gillian Triggs, Assistant High Commissioner for Protection with UNHCR, to give us some opening remarks. Gillian.
Well, thank you very much, Arafat, Excellencies and dear colleagues. Thank you so much for giving up even more of your time to the work that we're all doing to make the Global Compact real and to demonstrate its progress. As Arafat said, this is being live streamed, and I also wanted to welcome all of those from all over the world and in different time zones to this meeting and launch. As Arafat said, the indicator report is part of the follow-up and review process for the compact itself. In short, this is the moment of truth. It was one thing to announce pledges 4 years ago. We've had a preliminary indicator report, but this is the first time that we've been able, after 4 years of work by all of you, to assess the extent to which the compact has enduring value, that it is on the path to achieving its purposes. We have data and we have evidence. It's not perfect, but it is improving, and we are now able to make draw some conclusions about what has been achieved. And I thought it might be helpful just to repeat what are the objectives of the Global Compact on refugees. And they are firstly to ease the pressure on host countries, to enhance refugee self-reliance, to expand access to third country solutions, and to support the conditions in countries of origin for return in safety and dignity. So the key element of the whole process created by the compact is the indicator report, because it's not enough to have aspirations, it's not enough to make pledges. We've got to demonstrate that they are producing concrete impacts on the ground. And that is why I'm so pleased that we're here together to launch. Before you see it, it will be launched immediately after this meeting, but to be able to explain what's been achieved. Critically then, we have evidence that will help to guide the discussion and the development of pledges, and we hope to inform the various statements that will be made at the forum itself. We have some positive trends, we have sustained progress, but in summary, the progress has been slow and uneven. I don't need to remind this audience why we've had headwinds. Obviously, COVID, conflict, wars, the growing impact of climate change, inequality, poverty, all the reasons you're all familiar with. But what we are so grateful for is that the international community has held the line against these shocks, and it shows what can be achieved and why the compact principles and the mechanisms for giving it concrete effect are so important. Never has it been so important than in the current very, very challenging and distressing times. Now, of course, the report is about numbers, it's about evidence, it's about hard data. But of course, when we present that data, the plight of refugees becomes invisible. We really can't always understand what it means to be a refugee. And we need to understand that more fully. We've now got disaggregated data that tells us about access to fundamental rights: food, water, housing, sanitation, education, health, work, access to legal documentation, which is increasingly important to achieving outcomes. So we hope that this report will tell some stories as well as give the critical elements, to give some glimpses into the lives and aspirations of the people that we serve. Now you'll see, I think as the report comes to you, some wonderful artwork, and I wanted to explain that this is the artwork of the refugee community. And also the report, when you have a chance to read it, begins with a poem, and I think that at least puts a human dimension. And it's a wonderful poet by Ifra Mansour. You may have heard of her, but I think it just sets the tone at a more humane level. And she says, "I'm a refugee, a stubborn survivor. You see, cruelty tried to break me, wars tried to erase me, bigotry tried to silence me, and politics tried to ban me. But still, like time, I stand. Still, like dust, I rise. And still, like hope, I move. And still, like love, I flourish. I'm a refugee, and I heal humanity. Won't you just let me find my humanity right here next to you?" So I hope that at least puts a little bit of the human touch to the data that my colleagues are now going to present. And I'm particularly pleased that we have our great statistician to really guide us through the complexity through Tarek and all his team that have worked so hard over the last 4 years to provide us with this accurate response. So can I pass now back to Arafat and now to the details of the report. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gillian, and also for contextualizing all these numbers in a very human context. We are now going to watch a short video teaser of the report, which will be narrated by UNHCR's Goodwill Ambassador, Atom Araulo.
1 in every 200 people is a refugee, and the total number of refugees has doubled since 2016. With the majority of refugees fleeing war and conflict, new insights from the Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report can help us make sense of our changing reality. When refugees participate in economies and societies, everyone can benefit, both the refugees and the communities that host them. However, refugees continue to face barriers in accessing education and jobs. We have better policies now, but only half of school-aged children go to public school.
عشان الوقت اللي احنا فيه كل حاجة بقت بالتعليم بقى، وأحسن حاجة إن أنا أتعلم عشان أعرف أساعدهم كويس، وعشان إخواتي بقى يشوفوا إن دي حاجة كويسة وهما كمان يعملوا كده.
Our findings show that refugees can now better access work and move freely in the countries that host them.
Qualcuno sai se fue in sequente, ma te cade in guare. Qualcuno si te hale carne, ma tu vuoi dei in cafuraya. We found a board the connecting. Cade in a kagoi as our fura, I mean of ten fura, then we cut one from Suram.
From a brick factory in Niger to a patisserie in Greece,
لنظر من ويبدأ بيزنس يعني حركتك مدام بلو موفقيات.
refugees want to work, but only half of them access formal work. A safe refuge is a lifeline, but it is only the first step to solutions. In 2022, more refugees could rebuild their lives in countries other than where they sought refuge, although far below the number of refugees in need of solutions. There's no place like home. When possible and sustainable, the best case scenario for most forcibly displaced people is a chance to return home and rebuild their lives.
Bon, en arrivée, c'est un peu difficile, c'est un peu dur, mais c'est dans notre pays. On sait où on va rentrer et puis on va sortir.
We need shared responsibility, or in other words, we all need to chip in to help out. We all have a role to play. We see more diverse and local actors supporting refugees. The international community should work together to reduce the pressures on countries hosting the most refugees and foster a more balanced and compassionate approach to hosting refugees. Working with the data community to track the implementation of the Global Compact on refugees, we have more data now than ever. But knowledge is only useful if we act on it. The Global Compact on refugees offers a way forward. UNHCR urges states to renew their commitments to the compact and for everyone to continue standing with people forced to flee and the communities that host them.
So this video will now be available on our website after this launch event, and I encourage you, those of you who are active on the social media and elsewhere, to share it widely. I now have the pleasure to invite Tariq Abu Shabake, our Chief Statistician, to present the GCR indicator report. Tariq, over to you.
Thank you so much, Gillian and Arafat, and welcome everybody. It's a pleasure to be on this panel and introduce in roughly 15 minutes or so a report which is approximately 80 pages long. So I will not be able to do justice to its rich content, but I will give you a bit of a gist, a bit of a teaser through the eyes of data and statistics, which is my daily bread and butter. But as mentioned before, this is not a one-person show producing such a report. It's a collective effort. And I would really like to acknowledge here two colleagues, the masterminds behind this report. Grace, who is the coordinator of the report, and she's sitting right over there for those who are in the room, together with Radu, who supported her extensively in making this miracle happen and having this 80-page report now available. So kudos to the two of them for being the masterminds behind this collective effort of having the GCA indicator report bring to light. What did we produce as UNHCR? Well, 15 minutes, it's split into 3 different components about data and statistics. And allow me to quote the very first sentence of this report, which is the foreword of the High Commissioner Filippo Grandi, who states, data on its own can at times seem dry, technical, or sterile, but when we look more closely at what it represents, it can also tell a story, one that helps us think differently about how we can shape the world. I will, in the next 50 minutes, present a bit the story of data and statistics. As I mentioned, just give you a bit of a glimpse of what the report itself entails. Along the lines of data itself, along the lines of the global trends, and the lines about the 4 objectives of the GCR itself. What the good news is, and this was mentioned earlier already, we have more data available. What you see here is the GCR indicator framework, meaning 16 indicators form the framework itself. While it's not so important to look at the details of the indicator itself for this particular slide, but what you see is the traffic light. the green, the yellow, and the red. Green meaning we have more data available, meaning it could either be more countries are available to fill that particular indicator, or the quality of the indicator has improved because the data is now better available or faster available. Yellow means better methodologies, possibly having perhaps as well more countries available, but we're not there yet. And then you have two reds, which are still critical from a framework perspective, but unfortunately the data is not yet there where we want it to be in terms of data coverage, methodology, availability, quality, etc. But the good news is more and more data is becoming available. More evidence is available to understand the progress vis-a-vis the Global Compact on Refugees. And this is a collective effort that has been basically instrumented in the last few years in making this data available. And the subsequent panel will speak to some of those achievements across some of those indicators and how they, as individuals, as countries, or organizations, have contributed to making the traffic light move increasingly into the green phase. How do the trends look like? You've seen in the video already. Unfortunately, the number of refugees has more than doubled since the New York Declaration for Refugees and Migrants in 2016. And at the end of 2022 stood at 34.6 million. If you look at our website, we recently released another report about mid-23 data, and the number has now surpassed the 35 million mark. And it does not look ideal, to be honest, on how the numbers are progressing over the last few weeks. What it means is also that in 21 and 22, 10 million refugees alone were created or generated or had to flee their home country due to conflict, war, persecution, human rights violations, etc. And that's a starting number within 2 years only. And what it means is that in 2022, 1 out of every 200 people in the world was a refugee. And compare it to the declaration in 2016, the New York Declaration, it means 1 out of 400 people were a refugee at that time. So the likelihood of anybody of us here in the room or online or beyond, the likelihood of us becoming a refugee has increased substantially over time. How are refugees distributed around the world? We're asking ourselves, is burden responsibility sharing equally distributed around the globe? Each country taking its own share in a way? So we applied a statistical measure called the Gini, which is a measure of income inequality across the society, across the population, etc. And applying that to the concept of population size of a country, to the gross national income of this country, but also how it's developed from a human development perspective, using the Human Development Index as an indicator in that case. And the result is quite starking, that 80% of the world's refugee population is hosted by only 19% of the world's income. It means the world is actually heavily unequally or unequally distributed around the world when it comes to the number of refugees. At the same time, 55% of the world's refugees are not equally distributed across the almost 200 countries that exist, but they are 55% are hosted by 10 countries only. So a significant number of countries are taking quite a substantial number of refugees in. And how are those refugees distributed from between high income and low and middle income countries? You see in the graph that basically in 2022, 3 out of 4 refugees on average were hosted in the low and middle income countries, as opposed to about 1/4 in high income countries. This distribution has slightly changed in 2022 as a result of the Ukraine crisis, with a lot of Ukrainian refugees now being hosted in predominantly European countries, which are considered high-income countries. And what it also shows that over time, more and more refugees are basically have to flee their country, but the number of solutions available to them is not really available at the extent it should be. And we measure solutions along 3 dimensions. One is the return of refugees to the home country. Another one is resettlement to a third country. And the third one is the second and third one is local integration measured by naturalization of refugees, meaning refugees have the right to obtain citizenship of their asylum country. And taking this into account, it means for one refugee who found a solution in between 2016 and 2022, 5 new refugees were generated as a result of conflict, war, persecution, etc. And that's quite starking again. if you look at those numbers. Moving in more detail to the 4 objectives of the Global Compact on Refugees. The first one being ease pressures on host countries. And with many thanks to the colleagues from the OECD who were able to compile this information and provide it to the UNHCR team. Official development assistance in 20 and 21, you see the figures on screen, amounted to $26.4 billion, which means ODA provided for refugee situations in low and middle income countries. Unfortunately, ODA has slightly dropped in 21 compared to 2020. Almost, or rather, a bit more than half of this amount went to emergency response, which should not come as a surprise, given the number of emergencies that we have witnessed over the last few years. At the same time, ODA, 69% of this ODA came from just 5 big providers to this particular type of official development assistance. The good news is the number of donors reporting and providing funding has increased, but still it's only 5 who account for 69% of entire ODA to refugee situations. Unfortunately, no data is currently available for 2022 to fully understand ODA for refugee situations, in particular in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, but will be made available by the OECD in the coming months. Another component of ODA data is so-called in-donor refugee costs, meaning the assistance provided to refugees in high-income countries. And here you see about $30 billion were provided in 2022 alone, mostly driven by the Ukraine war across Europe and many high-income countries accounting for Ukrainian refugees in European countries. This is a stark increase compared to 2021, where in-donor refugee cost was barely $13 billion. So that's quite a big difference in this case. At the same time, which is important for the Global Compact is how do national actors receive those fundings in general on ODA? And the data shows 18% roughly of total ODA in refugee situations went through national actors, which is an important aspect when you look at it from a government perspective as well. Refugee response plans are equally important to understand and appeal for funding when an emergency breaks out and situation becomes quite challenging for refugees and host communities and host countries. And the data shows that 1 out of every 3 partners in those refugee response plans actually was a local partner as well, which means it's not only the big partners, but it's also localized. The Global Compact on Refugees has moved into becoming a local partner in that case from the eyes of the refugee response plan as well, which is an important aspect of the GCI itself. Looking at refugees' self-reliance, you have heard in the video that there's a difference between refugees who have access to work in law by the legal framework of a country, but as opposed to refugees who actually in practice can work. And the data shows that on average, 7 out of 10 refugees by law can work, but the practice shows it's actually only 5 out of 10 who actually work, even though they would like to work. There are still some barriers which prevent refugees to work in practice, working in the sense of formal employment in this case. Freedom of movement is an important cornerstone of the Global Compact on Refugees, and the data shows that actually only 6 out of 10 can move freely within the host country, which means 4 out of 10 actually cannot move the way they want across their asylum country. You will have seen or will remember the first slide on data availability. One of the red spots was on poverty. We do want to understand the level of poverty of refugees that they are exposed to vis-a-vis host communities, for example, or vis-a-vis the national poverty level. Unfortunately, data is really, really hardly available on how poor or not poor refugees are. And so we only have at the moment 8 countries. And this is it's a challenging task to collect this information. And it's predominantly national statistical offices who have the obligation and the task, in a way, to collect this data on refugees vis-a-vis their national population. But where data is available, it shows that refugees tend to be poorer, tend to experience higher poverty rates than nationals of their asylum country. Education, an important factor for refugees, but only 1 out of 2, actually on average, who are of school age are enrolled or were enrolled in national education systems. So it means the flip side is about half are not enrolled in national education systems. And even there, where they have full access to education, to the national education systems, many countries do not experience what we would wish for, 100% enrollment rates, which means not every refugee child is going to school, unfortunately. And in some cases, those enrollment rates range between 1 to 30%, which is quite low, actually. Third country solutions through the eyes of resettlement and complementary pathways for refugees, an important aspect of the whole protection and solution spectrum. If you look at the graph, it shows a bit of a disturbing factor, but it's also kind of not that as bad as it could be, hypothetically, because things are rebounding at the moment. You see the graph, the upper line shows the number of refugees who are projected to be in need of resettlement over the years since 2016. And they stand currently in 2022 were estimated at 1.5 million refugees in need of resettlement. The lower line shows actually how many refugees departed in practice through UNHCR's assistance. And this number is around the 100,000 or below the 100,000 mark in some years. The figures are rebounding in 2023. That's a positive sign, and we hope this will continue as more and more states hopefully provide this type of solution, the resettlement pathway for refugees. But it also means that not all countries are offering resettlement. And if you look at the numbers, 35 countries received UNHCR resettlement submissions in 2016. This number has dropped to 25 in 2022. So only 25 countries actually in 2022 received UNHCR resettlement submissions. And again here, the world is unequally balanced because 10 countries received 91% of all UNHCR assisted resettlement departures. So it's not all countries who are equally taking on refugees. Moving to the other part of solutions, complementary pathways and family reunification. And again, here, thanks to our partnership with the OECD, about 1.2 million refugees were able to benefit over a period of 6 years from complementary pathways and family reunification. But here again, it's only 5 who take about half of those 1.2 million refugees. Here again, when we talk about burden responsibility sharing, the data shows it's not equally distributed around the world on the part of resettlement and complementary pathways. Last but not least, objective number 4 of the Global Compact is about supporting conditions in countries of origin to ensure return in safety and dignity. Now, it's no secret that solutions are not available at the level as they were perhaps 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, where on average, in some years, even up to 2.5 million refugees were able to return back at the peak time in 1 calendar year. This number is nowhere to be seen in recent years, unfortunately. And it's hovering about 500,000 refugees, more or less, over the last few years, who found an opportunity to return back to their home country. 300, 400, 500, 600,000 kind of on average over the years. And that's a drop in the ocean considering the number of refugees that were newly displaced across international borders over the last few years, which is about 1 or 2% only finding a solution through returning to the home country. Mirroring this trend is official development assistance to support those refugee returns to in the country of origin has dropped slightly between 2020 and 2021 and stood at about $428 million in 2021. Last but not least, the last indicator, which is also a red spot in the indicator framework, unfortunately, due to quite unavailable data points over time, is the legal identity of refugee returns. When refugees return, it's important to have documentations in the hand for a number of reasons, including to prevent potential statelessness, of course, but also ensure they have an identity when they return back. Unfortunately, this data is hardly available. It's difficult to collect, but it's also not available when data gets collected at the level that we would like to have to say something meaningful about legal identity of refugee returnees. Voila. The storytelling through the eyes of data and statistics is almost completed. I hope it was a teaser for getting excited about almost 80 pages of the Global Compact on Refugees and the data and evidence it has. And as you see on the screen, I opened with a statement by our High Commissioner on data and evidence, and I will leave the statement up there, which is one of his closing remarks in the forward itself. But I hope that the Global Refugee Forum will hopefully bring in December in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hand over to Arafat.
Thank you so much, Tariq, for that. And I hope all of you found this as interesting as I do. If we are going to make progress and be able to achieve one of our objectives at this GRF in terms of stock taking, we need the figures in front of us. And so now we do have this 80-page report, which I know you haven't had a chance to read, but which will be available on the website, and you're encouraged to take a look at it, keep an open mind, and see where progress has been made and where improvements can be done. So thank you once again for that. Now we're going to turn to the meat of today's event with a data panel discussion. And I'll just remind everyone that we welcome your questions to members of the panel via the Pigeonhole. So we will be taking questions via the Pigeonhole system, which can be accessed by scanning the QR code that's up on the screen behind us. So at this point, I have the pleasure to invite Caroline Sargent to come to the stage. And Ms. Sargent will introduce the panelists and will moderate a discussion on data. Caroline works with the Force Displacement Team within the Fragility, Conflict and Violence Group of the World Bank, and she has over 35 years of experience in development policy and in delivering development outcomes. Caroline, thank you for moderating this next session, and I hand over to you.
Is it on? Is it on? You can hear me. So thank you so much, Gillian. Thank you so much, Arafat. Greetings to everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this launch on the Global Compact on Refugees Indicator Report. I think we've all been waiting with anticipation on this report. And I remember last year being here for the first indicator report. And Tariq, I'm very delighted to see some progress, although obviously it shows where we still have more work to do. I'm Caroline. I think I know many of you. I work with the Force Displacement Team, and I'm really honoured to be moderating this rather spectacular panel we have here before us. So let me waste no further time and introduce our panelists. The first on my left is Amal Abubakar. She works with the Somalia National Bureau of Statistics. She's a former refugee. I hear she's a very strong advocate for the rights of women and girls, and has been also in the past an advisor to the Minister of Youth and Sports in her country, and really fundamental in getting the first Somalia youth policy going. So we're really delighted to have her. Next to her is Vivian Orslander, who works with the Statistics Norway as a senior advisor. And he's got many, many years of experience working on statistics, on population, migration, refugee statistics for over 20 years. And I know him well because we've worked together on the expert group of refugee, IDP and statelessness statistics. So I know he's a bit of an expert. Then next to him is Daniel Tenkir, who's a minister councillor in the Ethiopian permanent mission here in Geneva. We're really delighted. He has over 16, 17, 20 years worth of experience in bilateral and multilateral diplomacy, and I know has a really good insight into the situation on the ground and the importance of data. Next to him, I'm really delighted to welcome Aisha Diko. She's recently been appointed the head of the Joint Data Center on Forced Displacement. That's the World Bank UNHCR Joint Data Center. She has many years of operational experience managing bank programs across Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and most recently was managing the bank's program in Niger. Aisha, congratulations on your appointment, and we're pleased to have you in that position, especially with the background and operational experience. And then finally, last but not least, we have Haya Shuta, who's the Deputy Director of the Development Cooperation Directorate of the OECD, and his work really focuses on addressing two of the fundamental challenges underpinning the 2020 agenda. That's mobilizing resources and leaving no one behind. And he brings data, policy analysis and guidance to the OECD members and to the Development Assistance Committee of the DAC. I hope I've adequately reflected the brilliance we have on this panel today. So I'm going to start, I think, with you, Amal, if you don't mind. Amal, you're working on the census with the National Bureau of Statistics and pushing for gender equality and the rights of women and girls, as I mentioned. You're also a former refugee. I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about your story and your experience of displacement. But then from your point of view as a former refugee, how do you see data such as those provided in this report? And how do you see it improving the lives of refugees and their hosting communities? Thank you. I think it's on. Yeah, I think it's on.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. And thank you so much for having me here. It's really exciting to be here. And let me congratulate UNHCR colleagues on this comprehensive report. So my journey as a refugee started in 2008 when I was 13 years old, when a terrorist group came into our town, which is in Lower Shabelle region of southwest of Somalia, about 120 kilometers of the southwest of the capital city, Mogadishu. So as I can recall, when they first came, they started getting married to the young girls, especially those who are in school. And as you know, at teenage, I had always dreamed of being the first member of my family to graduate from a school or university, as my elder siblings were not lucky enough to graduate from university because of the civil war in the country since 1990. So my father decided to take us to Mogadishu with my mom and my other three sisters. But it was not an easy decision because my parents used to live in Mogadishu and they left it because of the civil war, and now they are coming back after 18 years as IDPs. Yeah. And what made the situation worse was when we arrived in Mogadishu, there was a conflict between Ethiopian armies at that time in Mogadishu and what was called the Islamic Courtiers Army at that time. So we had no option but to move to Kampala, Uganda, this time as refugees, yeah? And getting there was like another story. Like we had no direct flights from Mogadishu to Kampala. So we had to go through Djibouti, from Djibouti to Kenya, Nairobi, 2 overnights in Nairobi, and then we were in Kampala. Another chapter started in my life, new environment, new people, new friends, new language. And there was also at that time tensions between refugees and host communities in Kampala at that time. So I succeeded joining high school. And the last year, I decided to go back again to Mogadishu because in Uganda, when you finish high school, you need to go to college for 2 more years before you attend the university. So I went back home. I graduated from high school and I got a scholarship from Turkey. I went to Turkey and I did a degree in industrial engineering and a master's in project management. So while doing while doing my master's, I applied a job at World Food Program Turkey, where I again got a chance to work with refugees there, as Turkey hosts more than 3 million there. And I got a chance to go to the camps and see young girls who were going again what I went through, the same scenario. And that was really touching. So after 4 years, I went back home, Somalia. I started working with the Somali government in different capacities. And I recently joined the Somalia National Bureau of Statistics, leading the monitoring and evaluation team for the census project. On the other hand, I'm fighting for the rights of young girls to join to school so that they can make positive changes in their community. And here I am today. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amal. And maybe we'll come back to your view on how the data really shapes the lives of forcibly displaced in the next round of questions. No, thank you, Amal, and thank you for sharing your story. And what an extraordinary journey from there to here. It's great, and it's great to have you here. So I'm now going to turn to Daniel. Daniel, the report shows that refugees are often excluded, underrepresented, not identified in national surveys and other data collections by the national statistical offices. But your government has started to address this gap by expanding the work on including displaced populations in your national data statistical systems. Could you tell us a bit more about these initiatives and what prompted you to collect that data on displaced populations, and what were the kinds of questions you were trying to find answers to?
All right, thank you. Am I audible? Yeah. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, UNICEF, for giving me this opportunity. It's a question you've raised, a good question, right? What makes us to make to collect data? And I know there have been some efforts to collect data on refugees, but refugees were not well represented in our national statistics services, which hinders their socioeconomic inclusion and integration. So it would have a real impact on government's efforts to improve the lives of refugees. So we believe that the inclusion of refugees in our national statistics will improve the government's ability to take refugees into account when making local and national policies. We believe it also helps, the humanitarian actors in providing protections for refugees. Most of the refugees in Ethiopia are in protracted situations. We have refugees there, they have been there for over 30 years. So we cannot respond to their needs in an emergency manner. Rather, we have to come up with a comprehensive, approach. So that's to do that, we need data. We have released our GRF Place Progress Report last month. Then among the key challenges which are stated in the progress report is the lack of adequate data and evidence to monitor and evaluate the outcomes and impacts of the GRF place. So most of our places are stated in figures, even the new GRF 2023 places are stated in figures. Unless and otherwise we do have disaggregated data, it would be very difficult for us, to monitor and evaluate the impacts of those places on refugees as well as host communities. So having data would be, very critical. The other issues today, refugees issues are cross-cutting. We are talking about refugees education. We are talking about refugees health, agriculture, everything. So it would be very difficult for the land ministries to include in their planning without having data. Ministry of Education cannot plan without having data of refugees. And Ministry of Planning cannot have a development plan without having data of refugees. So this makes necessary to have data, refugees data. And the other issues, is our commitment to implement GCR. If you take the GCR 45 up to 47, if I'm not mistaken, it talks about the importance of data. And it helps to improve, to achieve the objectives and visions of GCR. So due to our strong conviction to implement GCR, is very important to collect data on displaced persons. And it has been said so many times, data is very important to make an informed decision, to have planning, programming, everything. So to strengthen our planning and effective programming, data is critical in our side. And also is an important component of humanitarian response. So due to those reasons, we have decided to include refugees data in our national statistics in GRF 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. No, that was a very good overview of some of the real underpinning reasons behind why you're beginning to do this work, including aggregated data, so you can better shape policies, planning, programming at the local and at the national level. And we look forward with interest to more of this work that Ethiopia is driving forward. I'm now going to move to Vibjorn. Statistic Norway has had a really big influence on the sort of international arena on including forcibly displaced and stateless persons in national statistical systems. And your work, obviously, with the Statistical Commission and the expert group has really filled the gap on understanding how to collect, compile, analyze, and disseminate some of this data. And you've also worked in parallel in two areas. First, how to strengthen refugee statistics at the national level, and secondly, facilitating international technical cooperation. Can you explain why and how Statistics Norway has embarked on this journey to make forcibly displaced and stateless data sort of really visible in your data collection?
Thank you, Caroline. Yeah, I will try to answer that question. It's a little bit boring.
Is it boring? I don't think it's so boring. Make it boring.
No, but for us, it started with some visionary bureaucrats, actually, in the Ministry of Justice in the early 1990s, who they saw that Norway was increasingly receiving more and more refugees coming to Norway. And we need a system on how to follow these groups, see how they integrate into the Norwegian society. So at the time, they set off some seed money to Statistics Norway so that we could establish a group that could make a system for how to monitor and follow refugees and how they're integrated into the society in Norway. We were lucky in the sense that we could build on existing administrative data that was already there. We had a population register, we had a refugee register, we had different subject matter registries, and refugees were already included in all these registries. Our challenge was to identify them and to be able to make statistics out of this. But over time, we managed to develop this. Sharing of data between us and the Directorate of Migration was instrumental in order to get that process started. And over time, we have managed to build a system where we systematically can monitor how refugees do on the labor market, how the children do in education, what are the income disparities to the other migrants, to the total population. which in the end builds a system where we can develop also better policies, at least lay the foundation for producing or making better policies. And for us in Statistics Norway, we're also lucky that we also got more resources to analyze those data, because when you have all these different administrative data and combine them, you have a huge wealth of data that needs resources then to be analyzed. And we could follow the first generation of refugees who came to Norway, but equally important to see how their children are doing in Norwegian society. So that was our starting point. From there, we also saw that we are one of the few statistical offices in the world that actually produce statistics on refugees, on forcibly displaced. At least we were that some 10 years ago. And we thought we should share those experiences with the international community. And together with UNHCR and together with the Statistical Office of Turkey, we brought this to the United Nations Statistical Commission. And at the time, this was actually the first time that statistics on forcibly displaced was discussed in the United Nations Statistical Commission. Normally, they have discussions and they make recommendations on prices, on national accounts, on business statistics. But this time was the first time that refugees and IDPs and statelessness was discussed. And based on these discussions, we have managed to produce a set of international recommendations that can form as a framework for all statistical offices in the world to work together on how to improve these kind of statistics. And with the establishment of EGRIS, which is an important kind of facilist in making this work. In addition to this, we have also in Statistics Norway worked more bilaterally, and we are recently started a cooperation with the Ethiopian Statistical Service, where we work together with them on improving their population statistics, their CRBS systems, and also we hope to include refugee statistics in that work. So I really encourage. I'm really glad to be here and to also to share our experiences in doing this. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Bjorn. And I think it's really useful to share that experience and that journey. I mean, it's incredible to believe what progress has been made since you had those first conversations with the UN Statistical Commission, and good for many national bureaus of statistics around the world to see what's possible and what can be done. And particularly this point about bringing the evidence on the lives of the forcibly displaced and their hosting communities. So thanks for sharing that. So I'm now going to turn to Aisha. Aisha, the Joint Data Center has done such a lot in its short life to transition from situational sort of assessments to more high quality socioeconomic microdata on forced displacement produced by national statistical offices. And the efforts have borne fruit, as we've seen in the sort of increase in data availability and quality, particularly in the context of this Global Compact on Refugees indicator report. But we know, I think all of us, that it takes a lot of time and resources and effort to increase that data availability further. So can you tell us a little bit about how you think innovative approaches can accelerate and enhance the generation and use of socioeconomic data on forced displacement to inform really effective action on policy and on programs, and using a bit of your wonderful background and operational experience? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And thank you to Tarek for giving us a snapshot of how are we faring against the commitment that was made in the last year. I'm very excited to be here today at the launch of the GCR indicator report, and then also to have the opportunity to have this fantastic collaboration between the World Bank and the UNHCR to generate more socioeconomic data and analysis on displaced population. For those of you who may not be familiar, the the World Bank UNHCR Joint Data Center is a unique partnership between the World Bank and the UNHCR to really produce microeconomic social data to underpin policy and programs. So in our first 4 years of mandate, the Joint Data Center has initiated 65 global and local activities, and we've supported data collection and analysis in 35 countries, while also doing institutional strengthening. So the JDC engagement in country level data collection exercises through the World Bank, UNHCR, and other partners allows not only for the development of tools and technological solutions that directly respond to operational needs, but also provide a platform to really pilot and test innovating methodology and tools in the field. For example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country which not has a census since 1984, and therefore cannot provide sufficient population statistics on which to draw a sample. So the JDC was able to test and further develop an innovating sampling tool that allowed surveying IDPs, returnees, and host community in the Grand Kasai. And this tool is now publicly available and can be applied across a variety of forced displacement settings requiring minimal programming skills. Shifting from data production to data discovery and use, JDC has also enabled the development of a tool that will help data users sift through the huge corpus of projects and analytical documents published by Multilateral Development Bank to really better find and use content related to forced displacement. The tools actually apply machine learning algorithm and natural languages processing models. So as we look for the next 4 years of our engagement in our next strategies at the JDC, our third priority really speaks to the question that you asked earlier, Caroline. And then it is looking at data innovation to really increase the quality, the timeliness, and the accessibility of data. How will we do that? Well, the JDC convened some time ago, upward of 70 data science and innovation specialists from networks of upward of 20 partners, really to crowdsource opportunities to see how do we complement traditional approaches in generating household survey statistics with innovative tools and methods. And in that, but also in the other consultation that the Center has held, we've identified 3 areas of opportunity where innovation can really contribute. First, we think that the use of data, alternative data sources, innovative methods to enhance household sampling. For example, the use of grid population and data and building footprint layers to inform robust household survey sampling approaches in data poor areas affected by forced displacement. Second, we thought that the curation and integration of diverse data sources to build models for estimating socioeconomic indicators in forced displacement. For example, the use of satellite imagery, a marketplace price data and household survey to really build the models to update socioeconomic indicator estimate between face-to-face survey waves. And finally, third, the use of natural language processing to increase the accessibility and discoverability of socioeconomic data and evidence that are relevant to forced displacement operations and program. And that leads us in 3 areas in which at JDC, we are holding ourselves accountable for spurring innovation over the next 4 years. So we promise that we will drive development of innovating open source tools and research methods really to enable and improve the collection of representative but also high quality household surveys data in forced displacement context. Second, we will facilitate improvement in socioeconomic estimates through indicator design and production and the development of reproducible analytical models. And then finally, we will work to increase the discoverability, usability, and accessibility of data and evidence for all the stakeholders to use through innovative approaches to data protection, text analysis, and artificial intelligence. With that, I'll hand back to Caroline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isa, and thank you for sharing this experience and this vision for the future and thinking about what more innovative ways we can find good tools and methods for getting better quality data into the hands of policy and program partners. And I really like the idea of crowdsourcing all this brain power that exists to really think through some of this issue. And that's a real lovely role that can be played by a centre like yours. So finally, on this first round of questions, I want to come to Haya. So the OECD has invested lots of time and effort and resources in collecting data to fill this really critical knowledge gap on financing in refugee situations. And I know you're going to maybe say something about a new report. And you've got this newly adopted methodology, which I guess underpins that. So can you tell us a bit more about this and how it'll improve our understanding of how the international community implements the core principle of predictable and equitable burden and responsibility sharing, which is such a big theme for all of us and will be a big theme in the Global Refugee Forum. And what other initiatives of the OECD could help collect the relevant data for that? Thank you, Haya.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. I think I was fascinated by listening to my colleagues and the various perspectives they provide to data. So the OECD, we love data. Our policy is based on evidence. That's our aspiration. And we are also obviously, as members, collectively a very, very strong and important provider of support to the collective burden and responsibility sharing. So I think it was very, very natural that we stand ready to provide data to the Global Compact. And we're very, very happy about the excellent collaboration that we had with Tarek and his team in providing data about official development aid, dealing with 5 of the 16 indicators. So, and we are really, I must say, impressed by the indicator report, and I think it's really a massive step forward. Now, data is always something one needs to improve, and I think we heard that from colleagues here in the panel. We have collected so far data through surveys, 3 of them, the last just recently, and we just published the results of that. But the step that we did, and you referred to, was that we agreed to basically integrate these data on refugees, of their hosting, on internal displaced people, and their return into our regular reporting of data. So we have about 130 countries, OECD member countries, non-OECD member countries who are providing substantial assistance, international organizations, foundations. They report to us very, very granular data on an annual basis, according to a methodology. And so having now the data on refugees being integrated since 2022 helps us to really create very, very strong data and statistics that can be compared over time across sectors, across countries. So that's a massive step. We believe then for the next round of the indicator report, we will provide even better data. That's one. Secondly, our people, our statisticians also agreed on having a keyword methodology being agreed upon that looks basically and collects then data according to 3 keywords. This is capturing the support by our members and others to refugees, to hosting and the returning. And these keywords with the kind of technology that Aisha referred to, so machine learning, artificial intelligence, once again will allow us to provide much better data as to what is actually happening on the ground and what is being funded and what is not funded. So we're currently testing this on the basis of 2022 data. And we expect that these methodologies will be improved, and we hope that we will no longer need to rely on ad hoc surveys, which always have their shortcomings. We are conscious of the fact that obviously official development aid is only part of the funding mix. There are other providers, soft providers, there's private sector, there are foundations. And so that's the reason why basically this approach and the same methodology was also, upon our advice and with our support, adopted by a broader measurement framework. It's called the Total Official Support for Sustainable Development. It's basically a methodology that was developed upon the mandate of the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda and by an international task force. And now led to the creation of a forum. And this methodology is broader. It captures currently about the double the amount of what is official development aid. And once again, we'll provide a much bigger and more broader and more depth kind of sample of data going forward. Let me conclude, but just to say that the data is complemented by policy work on our side. So we have also, as an example, just a couple of days ago, a so-called common position of a subsidiary body of the DAC that agreed on a common approach to address forced displacement within the humanitarian and development peace approach. And we believe that this more comprehensive approach to capturing forced displacement, again, relating to better data, will also allow not only our members, but also others to then develop better development policies and financing. Back to you, Caroline.
Thank you, Haya. Thank you so much. And thank you for explaining so clearly the complexity of the methodologies and how you've been working on strengthening those to get better data and obviously the commitment to improve that data next time around. And hopefully next time in the indicator report, we'll see even more positive progress. And then obviously the OECD common position is really important because it aligns with much of the vision that many of the partners here have worked towards. So I think we might do another round if people would. I think it's super interesting and we have such a rich experience. So Amal, maybe I can come back to you. So one of the things the report highlights is the importance of including refugees and forcibly displaced through partnership, through financing in statistical systems, in data collection. So what does it mean to have genuine participation of those who are forcibly displaced in national data and statistical collection processes? And maybe, from your experience in the National Bureau, maybe you can tell us what this kind of looks like in real life on the ground when you're working at the coalface.
Sure. Thank you so much. Let me start by the following question about how the data provided in the GCR improved the lives of the refugees.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, so I went through the report and I want to divide the data provided in the GCR into two major sections. The first one is that the GCR gave an overview of the IDP and refugee situation globally, and the challenges, the gaps, and also it also gave another, the other section is it recommends and also promotes the collaboration between governments, international organizations, development partners, private sector, among others, so that they can create a more predictable and equitable, sustainable, responsibility sharing to a sustainable solution to the IDP and refugee situations globally. And with that, they also coming to the questions, they will be able to include refugees through innovations, partnerships, and also increasing financing. Yeah, as we know, refugees are often excluded, underrepresented, and sometimes they are not identified in the national services, or the other socioeconomic data collection. But they should be involved, because as much as possible in shaping and implementing the data process, because they know the situation better than anyone. Yeah. And the involvement also increases the relevance of the potential evidence produced. Yeah. Some countries like I think Uganda, Ethiopia, and also Chad started including refugees and IDPs in their national services, like the demographical survey, the multiple indicator cluster surveys, among others. A good example is Kenya. Kenya, they conducted 2019 population and household census, where they had IDPs and refugees included. And Somalia National Bureau of Statistics also developed a document recently on the nomads. In Somalia, we have 3 categories. We have nomad, urbans, and rural areas for the population. So there was recently a movement from nomadic places to the rural and urban areas. So we were able to finalize the reasons behind this and the recommendations so that we will be able, and also the government and other partners will be able to get invaluable data and insights, and that enables us, to efficiently plan and optimize efforts to support those people. And the data, we say it is, the entry point or the first step so that we can plan efficiently, and including those forcibly displaced people is a must. Without them, we cannot get, what do we say, a better data. Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Amal. And I think your point, they know the situation better than anyone. It reminds me of the call of the refugee-led organizations when they say nothing about us without us. So yeah, no, I think that was really helpful to get that insight. Thank you. So Daniel, I'd like to come to you next. I mean, your government is working on a pledge to advance the inclusion of refugees in national statistics so they can be better included in socio-economic activities in the country, and obviously their integration into national and local development plans. So could you tell us a little bit more about the pledge?
Thank you. And as I said earlier, we believe that inclusion of refugees data in National Statistics Service and National ID system would enable the government to better address issues of refugees by including them in national, subnational, and local planning, as well as service provision activities. It also makes easier for refugees to utilize the national system services. We have developed a digital identification system based on modern technology. It has been tested and piloted for the last 2 years. Now, this time, we are aiming to include over 800,000 refugees into the national ID program. This will enable refugees to access financial services and improve their social protection. When it comes to the national statistics, which enable refugees for their socio-economic inclusion and integrations, we are aiming to include 1 million refugees into the National Statistics Service with the support from partners. So there will be some actions to be taken from our side, like mapping mandated institutions for inclusion of refugees in generation of statistics from administrative requests, and this will require mapping the existing official and non-official sources, and we have to create a working environment or a working platform within the national development systems in the country, and we need a kind of, within the system, within the land ministries, signing data sharing agreements between Ethiopian Statistics Service, between refugees and returnees service, as well as immigration and citizenship service. And we'll ensure that the inclusion of refugees as target population in the national census, service, administrative requests, and various registrations. As you know, the systematic inclusion of refugees and displaced population in census and service helps to understand their profiles, their needs, as well as challenge vis-a-vis documentations. We will identify indicators that are useful for official statistics, and we will establish a system for data harmonization as well as coordination. And we will have disaggregated data based on age, gender, and disability. That will enable us to ensure evidence-based programming. And we'll make sure that refugees are included into sector or program-specific services that will inform planning and socioeconomic inclusions like nutrition, health, everything. On the other parts, we will have a capacity building on data collection, processing, as well as analysis for generating official statistics on refugees. So, as I have said, we do have some kind of experience on gathering data on refugees. And as it has been mentioned by Vaughan, we have cooperation with Norway Statistics. And we are, our national statistics is a member of EGRIS. We've implemented, international recommendations of refugee statistics. So by having those all exposures and experiences and cooperation with partners, we believe that we can achieve this particular place. But as the indicator report indicates, 55% of refugees are hosted just in 10 countries, and 3 out of 4 refugees are hosted in low-income countries. Then, as you can imagine, the burden and responsibility is not equally shared. Then we need, at least we have to make a balance in sharing the burden and the responsibility. Therefore, not only in this specific place, but also in our other place, we need partnership from, multi-year partnership from, partners, I think.
Thanks, Daniel, and thank you for picking up and highlighting some of those key points, which I think the panelists will pick up in the sort of next round. And maybe Vibjorn, Daniel mentioned the importance of disaggregated data, and I think the indicator report really showed that access to timely, high-quality disaggregated data is essential. But I think, as Daniel also pointed out, there are many, many countries that need more resources and capacities to respond to the data demands. And so maybe you could give us a few thoughts on what else could be done to strengthen those data ecosystems. And then I think we'll come to Haya, who will talk a little bit about the financing challenges and where that money is actually going. So maybe, Vibjorn, you can...
I'll try to answer that. So this will be very much based on our experience, and we try to build this on the existing systems that were already there that cover the whole population. And my advice to other countries would be to do the same. That you need to utilize the surveys, the censuses, the registers that are already established. Do not start up with having these parallel ad hoc systems, and do include in the surveys, in the registers, that refugees, IDPs, stateless, ideally should be included in either of these instruments, but also that the National Statistical Office is a part of this, and that it's also a part of the national statistical system. I think because otherwise there will be many of these one-off, these M&E attempts that you try to evaluate and then you move on. You need something that is sustainable and that can be repeated. I think those comparisons that can be made over time and make it much more valid for policymakers and decision makers, and a lot more interesting. And that in turn can also give more resources for data and analysis of data. And that's also a problem that I've seen in many countries, is that the data are there, but many NSOs, they lack resources to analyze the data and to work with the data. And here I hope that EGRIS and also JDC can play an important role in the years to come. Thanks.
No, that's good. No, those are good thoughts. Maybe I was going to come to Aisha next, but I think as we're talking a little bit about money, I wanted to come to Haya next. So the indicator report shows that in 2021, the total volume of official development assistance allocated to refugee situations in low income and middle income countries is around $26.4 billion. So, but it was unevenly distributed across refugee situations. So how can ODA be more effectively targeted to improve the lives of refugees? And how can we do it in a way that enables resources to be accessed by the National Bureaus of Statistics, who are so critical in getting the resources they need to analyze the data they have, strengthen the quality and availability of the data going forward? So I'll go to you and then we'll come to Aisha for the vision at the end. Hiya.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. Just to say that, as I mentioned earlier, we, on the basis of this survey that I just referred to, we published 2021 data. So you may say, well, we're at the end of 23. That sounds a little bit dated, but that's part of the, if you like, life of statisticians, that they look backwards, and it takes a while to collect data and then verify the data and then make it public. So what we are currently doing, we are actually verifying the data for 2022, and Tarek was referring to that. So we will have data about the funding that is being provided by the international community in assistance to refugees by the end of this year. So colleagues are working very hard in getting that data out, and then it's basically up as a public good, and everybody can access the data, and everybody can scrutinize the data, and everybody can do analytical work based on that. Just on, as you're referring to the 2020-21 data, and we are all conscious of the fact that the world has changed since then. Let me say a few words. Indeed, we had 10.3% of all official development aid was for refugee situations. About half of that went to low-income countries and middle-income countries, and about half of that went to what we refer to as in-donor refugee costs. So this is basically the hosting of refugees in OECD member countries, to put it simply. Just to say that obviously there is pressure from all sides about this concessional finance. Humanitarian is a top priority of our members, reflected obviously in the global compact. But just to say that in the deliberations and the sessions that I'm part of, that obviously we talk about climate change, we talk about health, we talk about biodiversity loss. There's a big push to mobilize more resources from all quarters of available, but nevertheless, it is a sparse resource that is heavily under pressure. 96% of all development finance for refugees situations were spent on hosting arrangements. Only 4% on the voluntary return and reintegration of activities in original countries. So this is one of the 5 indicators we are basically providing data for, and Tarek referred to this. That's, I think, quite a striking number. Obviously, we believe that we need to expand development finance in support of refugees in origin countries in order to allow them to return. Then maybe another figure is that 65% of all development finance for refugee situations were allocated for refugees in low and middle income countries. Once again, that was provided to 7 recipient countries. So most of those were upper middle income countries, Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Ecuador, and Colombia, to name. Maybe I should continue to say that there is a very strong concentration also on the provider side, with about 5 actors, bilateral, multilateral, accounting for 2/3 of all funding being provided. So there is a certain concentration, if you like, on the provider side as well. being a development banker, I see this obviously as risky. So any impact politically to any of those 5 actors will obviously have quite a dire consequence on funding being provided by the international community. So I think probably that there should be a further push, as also the Global Compact is saying, of trying to broaden the number of actors that are providing funding. Maybe let me just to conclude that capacity building is really critical. There's quite significant support being provided to building statistical capacities in developing countries more broadly, but also for refugees. It's not enough. We're always pushing our members to do more. There is one initiative that is hosted at the OECD. It's called Paris 21. That's basically the international initiative to strengthen the capacity of statistical offices. I just can call upon also our members who are in the room to maybe consider to provide further assistance to this, because as we heard from the panel, it is so critical to have good data for better policies, if you like. Back to you, Caroline.
Oh, thank you so much, Haya. And I think some of these are quite stark figures, but again, reflect the importance of data in underpinning the very important policy dialogue on the issue of burden and responsibility sharing going forward, and maybe to help shift some of that in the next phase, and obviously take the point about resources for capacity building and the importance of that. Aisha, sorry, I didn't mean to drop you out of my order, but I thought it was quite interesting because the issue of resources had come up to hear from Haya. But Aisha, that JDC is about to embark on its next 4-year strategy up till 2027. And that means there's going to be 2 more GCR indicator reports between now and then. So I guess we're all interested to know what areas of work are being strengthened in the JDC, and that could help improve the data availability for the following 2 indicator reports. Is that an early question? Maybe it's a bit early, but I think it's a good one.
Thank you so much, Karen. And thank you. It was good actually to hear Haya talks about, the financing part. So we are going to be working hard over the next 4 years to really making sure that we have data that's available, that to make sure that every single dollar that's being earmarked works as hard as possible to respond to the need of the forced displaced population and their host communities. So improving data availability is really critical for JDC. So we've really worked over the last 4 years to improve data availability in 2 ways. First, for every single of the 35 contexts in which we have worked, we require that all the data collection that we support be anonymized and made publicly available. So we've been very successful so far in doing this. So working with our parent organization, the World Bank and UNHCR, we've supported data collection and publication of 22 data sets over the last 4 years. Second, recognizing that UNHCR has a trove of data that would be tremendously useful to others at its disposal, we supported the UNHCR microdata library and really helped establish the workflow for preparing data to be safely published. And thanks to the efforts of the UNHCR colleagues, today we have upward more than 700 data sets available in the UNHCR microdata library to download right now. So going forward, the GDC will continue to support data collection on forced displaced population, maybe implement some of the commitment like that Daniel was mentioning earlier for Ethiopia, and then Amal also talking about Somalia, how they are working to make forced displaced population more visible in national statistics. So the 2 strategic priority of our strategy actually looked at specifically at contributing to that. So we are going to be working to ensuring systematic inclusion of forced displaced population in national statistics. And then our second priority is looking at, while this will be the default approach, so when it's not possible because of the timing of the national census or country development, we are going to be looking at targeted production of high quality data and timely analysis to inform policies and programs. So within those two priorities, we have identified 4 intended outcomes that we are going to hold ourselves accountable over the next 4 years. And then we'll really contribute towards directly enhancing greater data availability. So first, we are hoping that through our work and technical support, national household survey, for example, a national poverty survey, living condition and socioeconomic survey, multiple indicator cluster survey, DHS, demographic and health surveys, and labor force surveys systematically include the forced displaced population. We are also going to ensure that our financing and technical support ensure that an increasing number of national statistical offices have the capacity to identify and collect the data on forcibly displaced and state-led population, applying international standards, as Bjorn was talking earlier, through our support to the EGRES. We will also contribute towards supporting national statistical offices to develop national strategies for the development of statistics or similar action plan on official statistics that include the forcibly displaced population. And then finally, we will ensure that our parent organization, the World Bank and the UNHCR, as well as partners and government, produce high and disseminate high quality socioeconomic microdata. So maybe before I conclude, just to give you an example on some of the exciting works that we have been doing right now and supporting, which are producing data actually that are directly relevant to the socioeconomic indicator in the GCR framework and the likes, and for which we will be enabling further over the coming 4 years. So first, Uganda. So Uganda, as part of a long-standing political commitment to refugees, has pledged to include refugees in national statistics back in the GRF 2019. So this was followed by Uganda Bureau of Statistics, including a representative sample of refugees in the National Demographic and Household Survey in 2022-2023. So the government of Uganda and the Bureau of Statistics are also committed to including refugees in the 2023-2024 National Poverty Service and Development Plan. And we are, going to be supporting that among many other highly relevant indicators. This produced data that really speaks to the GCI indicator framework in the areas of education, of employment, and poverty. Another example that I really wanted to highlight here, for which we're also very excited to be supporting, is Chad. Chad was one of those trailblazer countries in sub-Saharan Africa that include refugees in a significant national household survey in 2018 and again in 2022. So by producing data that's comparable, the government could shape and enhance policies and programs in support of refugees and host community. And finally, Cameroon. So Cameroon is, committing over the upcoming population and housing census to contribute in filling the socioeconomic data gap on refugees, on internally displaced people and state-led people through their proper identification. So this will provide relevant information on refugees, which can then inform operational responses and guide inclusive development policies and programs. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
No, thank you, Aisha, and thank you for those great examples. And I guess people can find more about that on the JDC website, which is good. Now, I'm very conscious that I'm not doing a very good job of moderating because we're a little bit over time. And I know, Grace, you've been collecting lots of pigeonhole questions, and I'd like to give our panelists like maybe a quick fire minute each to let's see if we can answer some of these questions. Actually, I should have probably asked for them before so I could look at them. But hey, let's start. Okay, so Okay, so there's a question for Daniel, very specifically for Daniel. Daniel, thank you for mentioning Ethiopia's pledge at the Global Refugee Forum in statistical inclusion of refugees. Can you very quickly elaborate for the benefit of other hosting countries what motivated that pledge?
All right. Thank you for raising that question.
I'm going to be a firmer moderator this time, like 1 minute.
I mean, those countries are refugee hosting countries are, shouldering the burden. Then if they do have, the data, then they can plan and they get support even from partners to address the needs and, the challenge of refugees. So it's very important to know who is there and what's their needs, and to work, in cooperation with partners to improve the lives of the refugees. Then in that way, I think we can make a change on the ground when it comes to, host countries.
No, thank you. That's good. Amal, I have a question for you. So what specific indicators from the Global Compact on Refugees have countries incorporated into their national statistical systems to track inclusion of refugees in their data? I'm just thinking you've been working on this in Somalia, so it would be interesting to hear from your experience. Yes. No, don't worry.
Well, I think the specific indicators from the GCR, based on the objectives, on the 4 objectives of the GCR, the easy pressure on host communities, the resettlement, and also, returnees in safety and dignity for those who want to voluntarily go back to their countries, were some of the specific indicators that I can mention have as in our national statistical system, so that we can track the inclusion of those refugees. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Who am I going to ask this one to? Bjorn, maybe I'll ask you this one. Maybe you won't like it, but so what can you say? I think this is one of the questions in response to people who say that data about displaced populations and especially refugees is not worth the extra money and effort spent revising existing questionnaires and data collection methods to accommodate them. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I would say they're wrong. But,
they're wrong.
But what I would say is that it's not that much of an extra effort that you have to do. Obviously, there are challenges with sampling, with getting a good sample frame for if you use the survey instrument. But once, at least when you've done that, to have an additional set of sample persons in the sample would not, the costs would I can imagine be manageable. But once you have that, at least, then you have the great that you can compare this. You can use the same questions that you use for other groups, and you can compare this, and you can have it kind of as a part of a regular data collection exercise for the whole country. So my advice, based on what we have done, is at least build a system where refugees, IDPs, stateless are included, and use that, and use the same questions, the same kind of variables that you produce data from, also for these groups. Yeah, that's part of an answer, at least. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead. Hiya.
To make it a little lively here,
Yeah, let's liven it up a little.
No, quite frankly, I think if you don't have data about people, these people tend not to exist in policymaking. It's as cruel as it is. So I think I completely agree what has been said. Just to say that if I think, where we could take this further, I would love to have better data coming from national statistical hosting countries that would kind of highlight the big contribution these countries make in hosting refugees. So, I mean, it's rather easy for me to speak about the support by OECD member countries because we have huge data and obviously it can always be better. But having a better understanding of a huge contributions hosting countries, on financial terms make, as well as the contributions that refugees make to national economies, I think that would be really, really something I think that we collectively should aim to together and have also available for policymakers nationally and internationally.
No, it's a very good point, Haya. And I think there was another question is there a connection between the indicator report and the process of measuring the costs and impacts of hosting? And if so, how's the report informing measuring the impact and the other way around? And I'm not sure which of our panelists should be thinking about that, but I mean, it's clearly an issue that's been raised. Daniel, do you want to say something about that quickly? As we're about to go into another workshop.
I have been part of that workshop. I think, as a host country, we have to have the real data, what we are providing, for the refugees, and it has to be measured, right? What really, it is. And we have been saying, from the beginning, we shouldn't be just, come to that workshop and, participate as in the workshop. No, we have to be part of the process from the beginning up to the end. And finally, we can own, the result of that costing, costing exercise. So, I mean, this costing exercise needs data. Then if we do have, disaggregated data, based on, the needs, then we can, inform for the decision makers the burdens that we are sharing and, and what we are contributing to the refugees as well as for the international community. For example, from the donor side, X country provides such amount of money or dollar, but we are not costing, what refugee hosting countries are, providing in money, right? I said last time, we are pledging every day because we are receiving, refugees every day. Then that has to be measured and that has to be costed. If we do have, real data, that can be, an evidence for us to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think there will be a follow-up discussion on this in the week after next, I think. So then we can really think about how these two align well. Okay, I had one very quick one for Aisha. So to Aisha, they say, can you give an example of how the World Bank has used data to ease the pressure on hosting countries? One very quick example, and you can refer to where they can find it. Because then I have one final question.
No, I was gonna actually link it to some of the work that we have done when Haya was talking earlier, and Daniel's, some of the, like, for example, some of the analysis that we have done in Chad. No, Chad has done, like I said, without even support from us or anybody, included refugees in their national, surveys. And then based on that data, we have done additional analysis and we came out with recommendations. So those recommendations have actually allowed Chad to leverage additional resources from the World Bank to support refugees and and host communities, we're not only on the emergency side with where a project has to be retrofitted based on this recommendation to provide emergency support, including with the influx of the refugees coming from Sudan, but also looking to longer with the protractedness of displacement, looking to the medium to longer term response. That analysis has underpinned investment on energy access, both for refugees and host communities, but also investment on agriculture to really support livelihoods and the like, right? And then within the World Bank, some of the data work that we are doing are, underpinning, maybe supporting to a certain extent the eligibility under different windows, World Bank that support the host countries, like on the either side on the WHR, for the for the middle to high income country on the GCFF, And I think data would be needed both to support the eligible, but also on the implementation sides to make, again, like I was saying, to hire every single dollar that's earmarked works as hard as possible to have that much longer impact, not only for the refugees themselves, but for the host community and the country at large. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, am I allowed one last quick round? Have we got time? 2 more minutes? Okay. We have to wind up, they're telling me. Okay. Do we have one more question or not? No. Okay. Then I'd like to say a very big thank you to our panelists for joining us here today and for sharing their expertise, their own personal experiences, and really trying to bring some energy and reality check to these reports that so often get produced. And I just want to go back to what Tarek said at the end of his, the idea of this is to give us the kind of basis and the data and the energy to continue to work on this and looking to the next GRF to really have better quality, more available data going forward. So just a big thank you to our panelists. Been a pleasure sharing the panel with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panel and to Caroline for the excellent moderation. Apologies for cutting, but I know that people have other meetings to head to. So without further ado, I'll hand the floor over to Assistant High Commissioner Gillian Friggs, who will be making some reflections on today's event.
Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, Carolyn, for really terrific moderating, but also to this very distinguished and very well-informed panel. I think it really helps the discussion. I won't delay too much, other than to perhaps want to follow up on the point that Carolyn recognized, and that is one of the critical points that we have to remember is that we're only at the start of this process. We're only beginning, and there's constant improvement and constant understanding of data, how data can be improved, and the sources of that data, so that we can keep informing the process to answer the questions that so many of you have been asking in the pigeonhole. So we're on a pathway. We're on a way to really understand how this data can help inform policy, and each of you has raised that point. Perhaps I could add that it's one thing to collect the data, but it's another to analyze it and use it. And I think that one of the next parts of improvement as we go through into the future is just how we can all improve our analytical abilities to crystallize what it is that we've achieved. Many of you, I mean, the contributions have been very rich. Yes, it's all about collecting data to inform policy, to achieve the objectives, to protect refugees. That's what we're really here to do. But some fascinating points about open source tools, the crowdsourcing I found absolutely fascinating. Would love to know a bit more about that. The innovation, use of satellite imagery, artificial intelligence. There's a long way to go with this, and it's a very exciting time to be looking at data in the way that we are. Very important point about the common approach using the humanitarian development peace nexus. It's going to be an important theme at the forum itself in December. It sort of caught fire in a way. We've been talking about the development nexus for a very long time, but now we've really got some substance to it, and the data can help ensure that common approach. The point about the refugee participation. Thank you so much indeed, Amal, for your contribution. It's the refugee voice that can tell us more than anything else, and it was great to see your role, but also to see that role that we will now amplify at the forum. We have 300 refugees coming, and in fact, I was in New York just in the last 2 or 3 days, and making the point to member states that the very high-ranking people who are going to be coming, presidents, foreign ministers, they will find themselves being, the refugees will be wanting to talk to them and talk directly. And I think that's going to really energize the whole event, that we will have their engagement. I very much take the point about not having parallel sources. Let's pull them together and use them effectively and well. Capacity building, of course, critical, and we need to invest in that capital and the capacity building. And I think we've been trying to do that within UNHCR. I think the phrase was used, a treasure trove of data. I think it was ISATU. That's important. We have such a remarkable amount of data. But now let's learn how to use it. And I'll finish by coming to the key question, of course, in the pigeonhole is, well, how is all of these 16 indicators and all that data, how is that telling us the story about achieving the objective of sharing the burden and responsibilities for refugees? And we have to link that up as coherently as we can to show what the contributions are. And of course, it's very varied. Refugees are hosted and supported by poor countries, by low and middle income countries, but also by wealthier countries. And we have to understand the great diversity and variation in the way that burden is actually carried and to try to understand it better. So we've a way to go, but I think this indicator report is really outstanding. And I hope that it does help to inform all of our discussions over these coming 3 weeks before we get to the forum itself. So thank you all very much. Thank you in particular to Carolyn and to our very expert commentators, and of course to Tarek's team as our chief statistician, and of course to Arafat. Thank you very much for leading this.
Thank you so much, Gillian, for those reflections. And I hope that all of you have enjoyed the presentations today, have learned something. I certainly have. And I believe that one thing that really comes at me from today's session is very much what we're trying to achieve with the GRF. You've heard the High Commissioner say that that he wants this to be a moment of global unity. And I think as we look for what unites us, we can do no worse than to build it upon empirical facts, to avoid polarization that's based on suppositions, but rather to have the figures in front of us. And we have those figures, we can come together and we can work towards solutions. So thank you so much. The report is now live. It is on the website. Please do take a look when you can. Use the numbers, engage with them, and circulate them as well. Thank you once again to all participants, and of course to those behind the report. The meeting is now adjourned.